Hello, welcome to the Carole Nash Classic Motorcycle Mechanics Show. My name's Tony Carter and I'm delighted that you're with us now because we have a very special guest this year. It is a true legend who joins us of Grand Prix 500s, triple world champion Wayne Rainey. I should also say as well, a Daytona 200 winner. Wayne, that's part of your record too. Thanks very much for joining us. Do appreciate you coming down for this chat. And really I want to kick things off by looking back on your career 20 years ago or so. When you look back on your time at Grand Prix, how do you look back on it now? Is it with a certain fondness, or are there any regrets, or how do you look back on it?
Probably more regrets than fondness. You know, I guess, you know, it's been 18 years since I've raced. And I think I only raced for 6 years. And it all went by pretty quick. You know, it helped mold me of the character that I am today. I appreciate all the opportunities that I had racing Grand Prix, but you know, I don't think about it too much, though, to tell you the truth, Tony. I don't, you know, maybe I'm just turned 50. Well, I'm going to be 51 this month, but maybe I'm not quite old enough to be thinking about it that much yet. I'm not sure.
If we do go back to it, though, I'm going to force you to think about it a little bit now. If we do go back, what's the outstanding positive memory that you have of that time?
Oh boy, I just think you know, some of the classic battles that we had, and the effort that it took to get there, not only from myself but from you know, Yamaha, my team. You know, Dunlop at times, and you know, all the, you know, the suspension people. So you know, it was definitely it was a team effort, and it seemed like, you know, the championships that we won, it was a war and a battle at each Grand Prix, and you never thought that you were gonna, you know, dominate, and you always thought that that you could be behind at any time. So it was a pretty hectic, exciting time in my life.
Could you pick out one race that stands out amongst all others specifically? For me, I have to say Misano 91. You came into the pits, you put the tyre back on the bike, and then you went back out. I think you unlapped yourself and got to 9th or something like that in that race. An astonishing ride. But for you, from your point of view, is there one that sticks in the mind? Well,
that one was one I thought about, and when I do think about, and if I get asked that question, that's definitely one of them. There was a couple of them, though. I think some of them weren't always the ones that I won. You know, some like there was a race in Austria where Schwantz doing it just took off. I think it was in '93, and so I was racing for 4th place, and I ended up, I think I was 3 or 4 seconds behind Barros starting the last lap, and I beat him because he made all kinds of silly mistakes. But when we had actually passed him and surprised him when I went around the outside of him, and this was at Salzburg, the joy and the excitement I had was just like winning a Grand Prix. And because we shouldn't have been on the podium, and that was just one of those type races where, you know, we weren't going to be racing for the podium. I should have been racing for 7th and 8th, but we had, you know, ended up on the podium. But you know, Tony, there was, you know, the races. There was a race in Suzuka in '93 that was real special to me. I was able to ride the bike a certain way that I would rarely enjoy, and be able to ride it with that intensity and that connection to the bike. That as being a Grand Prix racer, that was probably the race that if I had every race, the connection I had to my bike, I would have been a 6-time world champion. You know, it was just too easy and too much fun that day.
Was that one of those races where, you've talked about it in the past, but one of those races where you're ahead of the bike, or you're sort of, it's an out-of-body thing, you're sort of aware of yourself, but you're thinking ahead, so far ahead, it feels like it's automatic? Is it one of those races?
You know, riding a 500 Grand Prix bike, you always try to put yourself ahead of the bike. You always tried to anticipate what the bike was doing, because you, more than anything, you aim those bikes most of the time as you accelerated out of a corner onto a straightaway. So that particular day when I was racing, you know, the guys that, all the main guys that you talked about earlier, I was just like a kid in a playground sticking my tongue out at them. You know, it was just so much fun, and I was ahead of the bike, and I knew exactly what the bike was going to do before it did it. And when you can race those style bikes like that, you're going to be hard to beat. And so that was always something that I strive for. I knew that's what I always wanted to try to achieve, is to ride like that, but it didn't happen a lot.
You talk about the pressures of racing in Grand Prix, and again, previously you've talked about the momentary relief, not necessarily when you won the Grand Prix, but when you won a championship. It's so nice that you can talk about doing that 3 times, of course, in Grand Prix, but the momentary relief when you cross the line, how did that manifest itself? Did you feel relaxed? Was the pressure off for a couple of days, or was it a much shorter time for that, or a longer time than that?
Yeah, I think in my case, in 1989, my second year racing Grand Prix, I actually raced Eddie Lawson for the championship, and so my rookie year I'd finished 3rd, and I think I'd finished on the box 6 or 7, 8 times, and so I didn't really expect to be racing for the championship my second year. But as it turned out, it went. We raced it all the way down to the last race of the year. And I remember in the end, Eddie won and I got second. And I remember how defeated I felt, and how big the championship really was when you had your fingers on the trophy, but it slipped out of your hand, and it was right there. And it was huge. I mean, I thought about it a lot in my heart, and I thought about it for months after. But during that time that I was thinking about it, it focused me in a way that I had never been focused before. And I made sure that some of the mistakes that I made, I didn't make again. And so I just looked at my whole program and was able to make it to where I was very competitive for my 3rd year in 1990. And that year I won the championship. But when I won the championship, and the feeling I had when I crossed the line, it was not what I expected. I didn't feel like I'd had a king's crown on my head, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I was very excited, and I felt like I had accomplished something that I'd been trying to achieve. But it seemed much bigger when I had my fingers on it and it slipped away than when I actually nailed it, So, saying all that, yeah, it almost automatically went, okay, refocus, start over again, like at the next race. So it's like if there was any kind of, if there was something in my career that I wished I would have done differently, would have been maybe to enjoy the success a little bit more, and appreciate it a little bit more.
Clearly, motivation a big part of your racing life. Are you still a motivated guy? What do you do to chill out away from everything? We know a lot about Wayne Rainey as the racer, as the team manager. You seem to be on a bit of a European tour at the moment, but what do you do to chill out?
Well, obviously, after I had my racing accident 18 years ago, I had a chance to run the Yamaha team, and so that was a different type of challenge, but it was so much different than actually racing on the bike. And very frustrating, yes, very frustrating, because basically I kind of got thrown into that position because of the accident. So there was 2 options. One was stay home and try to figure out what it's going to be like in my new life in this chair, or do it, but yet I had a lot of opportunities to go back to the circuit and run a race team and work with some riders and stuff. So I think there was some confusion, especially in the early years, the adjustment to my physical situation, and then also I wasn't ready to retire when I had my accident. I wasn't thinking about team ownership. I had never, even at that stage, I was, after I'd won the 3rd championship, I wasn't really thinking about retirement. So when it happened and I was forced into it, it took some time to adjust, and probably I felt really good when I was actually said, hey, you know what, I'm done with this. And I felt really, I had a lot of peace, much more than I ever did after the accident, up until that time. So there was a lot of frustration that I had, and it all wasn't just from the racing.
You ever think you'll come back to team management? Is that ever on the horizon? Will we ever see a Wayne Rainey team in Grand Prix?
I don't believe so, because first the travel is, I want to live in California. Unless they have 20 Grand Prix at Laguna Seca, it's going to be kind of difficult.
Well, you never know.
Yeah. So, but I see myself thinking about more maybe working with a young guy. I think I could do that now and do a much better job than what I did when I ran my team, I believe. I would have the patience for it. My situation now is much more under control. So I think I could have some fun with it, to tell you the truth.
Where do you think, let's just look at that for a moment, the hypothetical young guy who you could work with. Where would you think that guy would come from? Somebody like a Moto2 rider, if we're going into the top class. Moto2 rider, or a dirt tracker. You were a dirt tracker. Eddie Lawson was a dirt tracker. Kenny Roberts was a dirt tracker. There seemed to be a point in Grand Prix where you guys ruled the world for a long period of time. We don't seem to have that anymore. We don't seem to have these riders coming through who can break traction like the dirt trackers and find their way onto the road. Where do you think the next wave of young riders will come from?
Well, I mean, if you look at currently what's going on out there, Spain has a very good program for these young kids to start at. That there's a lot of racetracks in Spain. The general public supports it. They have national TV. They have a lot of sponsorship. So I think if I was to find a guy, and I was real serious about it, I'd probably try to get him over there to Spain at the moment, because I know in the States it's pretty much non-existent trying to get a guy into GPs at the moment. It's very, very difficult. So, but saying that, I would probably tend to look around closer to my home. We have a few circuits that they race club racing at, and then you do get the opportunity to go out and see potential young development riders coming up.
But do you see a point where we will ever go back to the days of kids who learn how to break traction on bikes would find their route into Moto Grand Prix? Like the dirt track thing. The reason I ask is we've got Casey Stoner, amazing rider, comes from dirt track, originally a dirt tracker, and Casey, even with all the electronic aids and everything that they have right now, Casey has that bike moving around underneath him like nobody out there. He looks like he's gone past the point all the time, and he's catching that thing and it's moving around underneath him. Is that because of his background? And if so, will we ever see that come through from the American side?
Well, I think it's going to have to, because when you have that type of feel from a bike, you can go to the edge and go past it without without it slowing you down. And I think now when the bikes go up in CCs, they're going to be even a bit more aggressive, the way the engines are going to perform. So I think, it's one thing riding the wheels in line, and maybe with the 800s that was a good way to ride these current bikes. But I think next year, guys that have more of a dirt track background are going to be probably at the forefront, more so than where they are now. Maybe Hayden would do a little better next year, But you know, I looked at as far as my career and how I approached it. I looked at the best guys. You know, Lawson, Roberts, Spencer. Those guys were all dirt track guys.
Yeah.
And not only did they, they didn't win just a couple races. Those guys dominated. And that was my background. That's what I did. So, dirt track racing, it teaches you to race aggressive and teaches you to race. You have to do everything very, very fast because the races are over so quick. So, if you get a bad start, you got to get to the front real quick. And but I think that's where, as far as what my concern is, that I see the problems that we have on the American side is that we don't have that guy right now. He's not there, but he's there somewhere in the States.
Yeah.
We gotta, and when you find a guy like that and they have that talent, they get there. It's those guys don't struggle as much as the guys that are looking for sponsorship and trying to get that ride, because when you give that guy the opportunity, he takes advantage of it and he's there. And basically that's, when Kenny hired me, he saw my background, he saw what I was doing in the States, and a lot of guys, they don't see that over here in Europe. So when Kenny hired me, there was a lot of people saying, why do you do that? But Kenny knew, and so did I.
If we look at MotoGP now, staying with the Casey thing, what Casey did on that Ducati was phenomenal, and I think we're seeing that now. With what Casey did on the Ducati then, do you think that he has become something of a monkey on the back of the guys on Ducati right now? Because now we're starting to appreciate, I think, what Casey Stoner did when he was on the red bikes. Is he a problem for Rossi and for Hayden, a continuing problem for them? Oh,
no doubt. They're always going to be looking at what Stoner did. And, the guys, he rode that bike hard. And now that he's gone and you see the results of the current guys that are riding that bike, you go, wow. You really appreciate them when they're gone. And I'm sure Ducati thinks about that a lot more now. I think when they hired Rossi to ride the bike, I think they thought, that's not going to be a dip here. We should be able to continue where Casey finished and keep going. And I think a lot of people thought that, but I think a lot of things have changed in Rossi's. How should you say, his armor now? What's happening when, especially when Lorenzo came to the team, Rossi had somebody to race him. So, he wouldn't. I don't think he ever had that before.
I think it's quite fascinating with the Rossi thing, though. I think there's a couple of elements. I'd like to know your thoughts on this. When Rossi got injured in the season, first real injury, there's always the racing saying, isn't there? It's how you come back from the injury, and the rider you are when you come back. And possibly, would you agree that Stoner on the Ducati was probably prepared to ride to the point of, if a crash came, whereas now Rossi at the point of the career he is at, probably that isn't there. Do you think that's...
Yeah, it's if you look at Rossi, he started racing at a very early age, Grand Prix, and he's been in the spotlight, and being an Italian, and the popularity of the championship in Italy, it rose also with him. And so, yeah, as you say, when he had all the success, but he never really had an injury that made him sit on the sidelines and, watching from your bed at home, and you see the championship carries on without you. He never experienced that until that day of Mugello, when he high-sided that thing on an unforced error, as far as I was concerned. And so I think there was a lot of things that changed for Rossi that day, and I think he actually lost some confidence in himself. I'm not sure he believes in himself as he once did.
Fascinating. I think you're right. I think that's something that a lot of people don't associate with Rossi, because he's a rider who's built on confidence throughout his career for such a long period of time, or certainly appeared to be very confident out there. So do you think then that Jorge, Casey, to a lesser extent perhaps Danny, but those guys are now moving the field on, and because of where Rossi is and what's happened to him, he's starting to be left behind. Is that how you see it when you look at MotoGP?
Well, I think I'm giving Rossi, because of what he's gone through and how he had to experience that, and me going through things like that, I understand that, that can work on you much more than you would ever think. And he's experienced that. So I'm prepared to give him a little time. I think he's been riding injured a lot on this bike. This bike, its DNA is so much different than any of the bikes that Rossi's ridden for in the past. And I don't think he was quite prepared for that to be such different, the feeling of, what the tires are telling you. And I think when he does push it, he makes mistakes and falls down. So, he's almost like, we were just talking earlier about getting in front of the bike. He's still behind the bike. He's not in front of it. So, but saying all that, he's still what? He's still in his early 30s. I think he's at the very best that he will ever be, could be next year.
Really?
Oh, for sure. There's no doubt, because you've got the experience, you've got the championships, just what he's going through right now. He can use that for next year. And the bikes are going to 1,000 cc's or whatever the cc limit is, and he could be right there again. So I would, if they could give him a bike that he has confidence on, I think he can put it all together for one more year.
Just as we're thinking about Rossi, just something popped into my head. But who was the best Grand Prix racer you ever saw, or have ever seen? You can't put yourself there, Wayne.
Yeah, well, wow, that's tough.
A lot of people talk about Rossi and say greatest of all time. He's unsurpassable. But Grand Prix racing goes a long way. I mean, for you talked about Kenny as being a main inspiration, but Spencer, from an American point of view, when Spencer came over and did the 250 and the 500 in the same year, astonishing stuff. But from your point of view, who was the best who you saw? I never competed against Kenny on the racetrack, but I was able to ride with Kenny a lot off the racetrack. And we spent a lot of time together, and I was able to ride with him, especially when he had just finished his career. So he was very, very in his early 30s. But I'd never seen a guy have as natural balance as what Roberts had. So to answer your question, I don't know if that was the best guy I ever seen, but it's probably the best guy I've ever ridden against. Really, yeah. Such a shame that you couldn't go out head-to-head and find out on track, what he could bring to the party and what you could bring to the party when you were against him then, really. Well,
I think if you ask all the big champs, they would all love to have ridden in everybody else's era, just to see.
Absolutely. MotoGP these days seems a little, I guess the polite way of putting it would be frantic with some of the passes that's going on. The reason I put that in front of you is because I maintain that back in the day, back in Grand Prix 500, when you were amongst the 3 or 4 riders in the world who ruled that for a number of years, it always seemed a bit more graceful, even though the bikes that you were riding were animals. Very vicious things, lots of power, lightweight, and carbon brakes were just coming in. They were vicious animals, but it seemed a lot more graceful. Your overtaking moves were tough, but they never seemed as out of control as we've seen recently. I'm thinking Simoncelli on Pedrosa, I'm thinking Carole Abraham, I'm thinking all sorts of things that have been going on in MotoGP. Would you agree that the 500 GP days were more graceful? Was that because you guys had to think more about it, or because of the nature of the bikes?
I think it's all of that. I think how you had to ride the 2-stroke compared to how just the 4-stroke in itself without electronics is like riding a 2-stroke with electronics. Just the 4-stroke alone, just the difference in character between the two bikes. But you mentioned Simoncelli's pass on Pedrosa. That was a mistake as far as I was concerned. With just misjudged it a bit. Well, a lot.
The whole point is that a lot of the MotoGP guys, if they're going to make a pass, it seems to be throw caution to the wind and go for the pass. If it sticks, it sticks. Whereas back in your day, it was a case of you go back and watch Hockenheim, you go back and watch Misano, you go back and watch any of the great battles, Suzuka. You go back and watch the French 88 Grand Prix. And there's lots of tough moves in there, but it never seemed quite as frantic as it does now.
Yeah, you know, I think most of the, when you talk about that era back when I raced, you know, most of those guys are, you know, they're racing for the lead. And it's, maybe I don't know what the right word is. Frantic? I think...
Desperate. For another word.
Well, I think frantic might be the way it is now with those guys you're talking about. But in the era that I raced in, it was never frantic like, boy, I hope I make this turn. I hope I can make this pass. It was always, you know, myself, especially, because that's all I could control. But I knew I was going to make the pass, you know, and I knew sometimes it was going to be tight, and I knew sometimes there was going to be some, maybe some rubber on me or somebody else, but it was never like, I don't know what the percentage is going to be if I make this corner or not. It was never like that. It was always
considered.
Yeah, it was
considered racing. You always thought about the move and you worked it out, and it was on. If it wasn't, you just waited.
Yeah, I mean, it was.
Unless it was last corner, last lap for a championship, I guess.
Well, and to be champion, it was the guy that made the less mistakes, and it's still that way. So guys that make frantic passes are not normally the guys that are racing for the championship.
Yeah, true. But we're talking about frantic passes, guys not racing for the championship. We should take on Marco Simoncelli. He's a guy who grabs the headlines because, you know, he looks a bit out there. He's quite a flamboyant character. He's hard on track. What do you make of him?
Wow, you know, you're right about all that. You know, he gets a lot of press for somebody that's been on the podium how many times?
Yeah, not very many.
Yeah, so his PR guy's doing a good job, it looks like. But I think in MotoGP we're looking for, you know, the next guy that can mix it up with the current guys, you know. So you take a guy like Simoncelli that's, you know, he's got that, he's got some charisma and he's, you know, he's a big guy and he's made a lot of mistakes, you know, and after a while you go, oh, you just feel bad for the guy, you know, because you know that's not what he wants to do, but that's the way it ends up. So, you know, he's going to be there though. I think next year will be a better thing for him because of the, you know, the bike would probably work better for him because of his size, and he has learned a lot from all this. You know, he being Italian and you know, the Italian media and for that matter, you know, the world media, you know, pounding on him, you know, a few times this year. I'm sure he's wishing he had a haircut then, you know.
Do we think, well, what do you think about MotoGP and the future of MotoGP? Arguably we need Simoncelli because we need somebody with that charisma out there. We've got Casey who's a bit insular really, but will speak his mind, that's a great thing. We've got Jorge who's, you know, Spanish, so will get mobbed wherever he goes. Valentino's arguably at the tail end of his career, although riding, like you say, maybe better than ever. But where do you see the future of MotoGP going? What do you think we're doing right with the sport?
Well,
we can't bring back 500 two-strokes.
No, we can't. Can we? I think going to this what they're doing with the engine capacity next year is a better move. You know, MotoGP, it's the top level. It should be difficult. The bike should be hard to ride. There should not be that many guys that can just jump on a bike and be within 2 seconds of Casey Stoner.
Yeah.
You know, when that happens, there's too many gizmos on the bikes that make it to where a guy that has, you know, quite a bit less talent can get within 2 seconds of Stoner or the top guys. So I would love to see it, and we all know about this. And we need to take some of the gizmos off the bikes. You know, we need to see them wheelie more. We need to see them spin more. We need to see them when as a spectator, like I did when I used to go out and watch guys ride 500s, and you'd watch them go through a corner for a practice session. You go, I don't want no part of that. That's what we need.
Yeah.
You know, because right now
pieces of work to ride like the 500.
Exactly. You know, and now you know, I'm sure guys that race in the British Superbike Championship or the AMA Superbike or whatever it is over there, they probably go, I could do what Stoner's doing, you know, but they can't.
It's fascinating that you pick on BSB, or you raise BSB, because next year, British Superbike Championship is losing all of its electronic aids. So next year, BSB is going back to the purity of rider, right hand, and the feel for what the tyres are doing underneath them. So they're sort of leading the way in that respect.
Oh, I think that's going to be good. That's only going to. I think, you know, maybe the racing might not be as close if there is a superstar in the group.
Yeah.
He'll come out of that, and because the guy, you know, a lot of the times you can get real close racing because of the electronics, and you take some of that stuff away where you need more rider talent, then sometimes it gets a little boring.
Sure. Hard to put the genie back in the bottle, though, to a certain extent, like on the World Championship, because riders, by their very nature, want the advantage, want the next thing that will help them. You, 88, Donington, carbon brakes, you know, that was an advantage. It was a technical advantage, and you managed to make it work, and you got the win. So you as a rider, you're always looking for the next big thing, aren't you? No
doubt. There's no doubt. And I think, you know, that's what's happened, you know, with the current generations of bikes. You know, the factories, they spend a lot of budget understanding how the electronics can work, how they can turn it into a lap time. It took a tremendous amount of money to do that, and a lot of you know, research and development to make that right. And you know, another byproduct of that is a lot of the riders are walking away from at the end of the races.
Yes.
Much more, because the bikes are so much more predictable. But we don't want predictable bikes. We want bikes that are hard to ride. You know, that just a few mortals can control. So, in my opinion, but saying that though, yeah, every rider wants an advantage. You know, whether it was carbon brakes, or if you had a special tires nobody else had, or if you had better electronics than the next guy. Yeah, you're going to want that. But if you take all that stuff off, I mean, nobody's going to miss it.
No, true. Let's just start wrapping this up, talk about World Superbikes, because we talked a lot about MotoGP. The World Superbikes this year has been dominated by Carlos Checa and the Alfea Racing Ducati. Now I know you and Carlos go way back when. I know he's a close friend of yours. Your thoughts on the way Carlos has run his campaign this year?
Was brilliant. Just I was very, very, very happy for Carlos. 18 years trying to do this, and he rode this year like he's never ridden before in his career that I've ever seen him. He had a belief in himself, and he was able to control his emotions much more than he ever did in the past. And that's what it takes, you know. No matter how much you tell somebody that, they have to believe that, and then they have to do it. And that's the hard part.
There's a part of racing that where you've got to beat the guy who's opposite you in the garage. He's your teammate's the first guy you got to beat. But also when you're winning championships, is there an element of it where you feel you have to go out and destroy the competition, either destroy their spirit or destroy their psychological makeup? I'm not talking about anything physical. I'm talking about break them mentally. Is that right?
Of course it is. Well, it was something I always felt I needed to do, because if I was fourth, I made sure my teammate was fifth.
Yeah.
You know, because if he's ahead of me, how much can you bitch and moan and complain if you're getting beat by the guy on the same bike? So yeah, the first guy, you know, and I started that early in my career. That you know, when you're racing and you're getting beat by the guy that's on the same equipment, you have to just walk around with your mouth taped up, because nobody's going to listen to you when the other guy's kicking your rear. So yeah, and that was always, I enjoyed that part.
But how do you destroy the competition? How did you destroy the competition? Was it going fast right from the start? Was it getting out there, putting a fast couple of laps? I'm thinking qualifying sessions, practice sessions, you know. Was it throughout the entire weekend? Did it start when you rocked up in the motorhome? Was it as early as that, or was it before the season even started?
It's all that. It's all that and much more. But you know, with that, it's, you know, it's experience and being in those situations and having the belief that you're gonna, you know, even if you qualified on the third row, which I have before, and knowing that Mick and Kevin's on the front row, and I know that they're thinking Rainey's going to be racing with us.
Yeah.
I mean, bring it on. It was perfect.
Talk about bringing it on. The Isle of Man TT races. How aware of the Isle of Man TT races are you?
Probably more.
I'm not going to question you about who's going fast out there or anything, but as an event.
Oh, brilliant. You know, I wished I would have been able to see a race live. I haven't had the opportunity. When I was asked many years ago, it didn't work out because it was basically after I was injured, so the timing didn't work out well. But man, I have a lot of respect for those guys. You know, I look at those guys, the way they ride those bikes on that, like guys that climb Mount Everest. You know, I just think I couldn't do either one. You know, not like those guys can. So I have a lot of respect for what those guys do. There's no doubt.
There was a story that went around, and you'll have to tell me if this is true or not, that the first onboard lap that was ever filmed was Steve Hislop of the modern era as was, and we did hear a story that went around the Grand Prix paddock at the time, and it was quite a favourite of Grand Prix riders just to watch this tape of this onboard lap of the TT. Is that true?
Sure.
Was Hislop known for his exploits on the TT by the
Well, I was shown a lap with Steve. I think it was at Donington Park when somebody gave me this onboard lap, and I forget who it was at the time, but I couldn't believe my eyes that they would actually go in that fast with, you know, what they do, how they do that, and they're so, you know, they approach that race like they're racing on a proper Grand Prix circuit.
Yeah.
And there's no, you know, on a proper Grand Prix, you gotta, you know, in the back of your mind that, yeah, maybe I could get hurt, but there's a lot of corners here that I probably won't get hurt. But there's nowhere, mostly on that lap that those guys do, that they can think that. But yet, those guys race each other in a way that they're not thinking that way. And I remember watching that tape with Hislop, and there was a blur that went by. And as I was watching it, I went, what was that? And they go, what do you mean? I said, there was something in that tape that was just a blur. And I don't know what it was, but it looked fairly big. So we stopped it and rewound the tape. And it was, when we slowed it down, we saw this blur was going the other way that Steve passed, was this traveling Marshall. You know, I just couldn't believe the speed difference. It was incredible.
Well, Wayne, we'll have to do everything we can to try and get you over to the TT so you can experience it firsthand. But I think we'll draw this to an end there. Wayne Rainey, thanks so much for talking to us. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the Carole Nash Classic
I will.
Mechanics Show. Cheers.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.